Ahoy there, Captain Benzie here, coming at you with another video for Infinite Lagrange. This video is sponsored by NetEase, and if you're curious as to what that means, then check out the link to my Discord in the description down below, as I've released a statement about it all there. Now, in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at one of my new favourite ships in Infinite Lagrange, the Jupiter Industries Quaoar, and it's not my favourite because it's fun to say, although that's certainly a perk of it. Now, if you do enjoy this video, please do let me know by hitting a like on it, subscribing to the channel, dinging the notification bell, and all of that jazz. Seriously, it does really help out. And if this is the first time you're hearing about Infinite Lagrange and you fancy giving it a try, make sure you check the download link in the description below, along with joining the official Infinite Lagrange Discord. It's full of a bunch of really cool folk who are more than happy to sit and talk about this game for hours on end, give you all the advice and tips and tricks you need. Anyway, with that all said and done then, let's jump into talking about the Jupiter Industries Quaoar. Now, first of all, that name. What on earth are we going on about here? Well, if you look at other Jupiter Industries ships, so for example we have the Eternal Storm, which is the battlecruiser for them. That's named after the Red Eye, the storm on Jupiter. If we go a little bit further, we have the Callisto and the Io, both of which are moons of Jupiter. And as we come down to things like the destroyers, we have the Ceres, the Eris, and the Quaoar. And those are all celestial bodies in space. Ceres is in the Jovian belt, whereas Eris and Quaoar are both Kuiper belt objects. In fact, if we go down right to the bottom to the Mare Nubium, the Mare Tranquillitatis, and eventually the Mare Serenitatis, which I don't currently have yet, those are all named after mares, or seas, on the moon, which essentially are some of the larger craters. Mare Nubium is the Sea of Clouds, Mare Tranquillitatis, Sea of Serenity, and Mare Serenitatis, it's the Sea of Serenity, sorry, the Mare Tranquillitatis is the Sea of Tranquility, of course. Anyway, enough about naming conventions. Here we have the Quaoar itself. Now, the name itself, Quaoar, comes from, I think it's Tongva, one of the sort of the native tribes to sort of the San Diego area, I think, of California, Pasadena area, where the where Quaoar was originally discovered and named after sort of this creation god. It's a really cool destroyer, and one that was added recently as part of the new Phase 2 blueprints alongside things like the Jaeger, which I will cover in another video elsewhere as well. Now, the Quaoar is one of these interesting ships in that a lot of people have dismissed this early on. They've unlocked it, looked at its stats on paper, and then gone, nah mate, why would I bother using it? Now, as you guys may know from my video on the Carillion Recon, I like to basically tell these people to sit down, shut up, and reevaluate their life decisions. The Carillion Recon is often dismissed as one of the worst ships in the game. In my opinion, it's the most underrated frigate in the entirety of Infinite Lagrange, and the same is true here with the Quaoar. Now, this is a railgun frigate. It has on the front of it an integrated railgun system here, which is a bow-mounted railgun, which has got some pretty solid stats here. It starts off at like 8,491 per minute, and you'll see that that has priority for destroyer, frigate, followed by carrier, battlecruiser, and cruiser. And to me, that's actually a really interesting and really useful attack priority. The fact is that as you get into the later game, you start seeing fewer and fewer destroyers and frigates, which means the Quaoar is going to start off most of its combat fighting against carriers right in the distance, and this thing packs a punch, as we'll talk about in just a moment. We then have railgun turrets here on the side of the ship itself. Now, these themselves, you can see it's got anti-ship fire here, fairly high, but for the most part, these are battlecruiser and cruiser and carrier to start with, before moving on to corvettes and fighters. Again, this means the Quaoar is going to be looking at your opponent's big ships and trying to take a lot of those out first, before worrying too much about the smalls. Now, if we have a look at some of the stats here, you'll see this is really actually quite a nice starting point here. We start with 6727 on its anti-ship fire, and that then scales up dramatically. Now, a lot of people have said, oh, its damage looks pretty low. Just as an idea here, I'm running on 2220 on the main version number at the top there. You can see how many enhancement points I've put into this, and we're sitting at a total firepower here of 11,794. That is a pretty big number. In fact, if I come out and then compare that to my Winged Hussar, which is sitting at 5029, a lot higher on the enhancement points, you'll see here that the Winged Hussar is only sitting at 8,983 DPM, despite all of those upgrades. That is a fully upgraded Storm missile system here on the Winged Hussar, along with a whole bunch of points in the Carillion K-Dual Cannon Bow Siege Cannon. So Ultimately, when people tell you that the Quaoar doesn't have the same kind of firepower that you'd expect from a destroyer, it packs it in spades. Ultimately, yes, it's theoretically not quite as good as something like the Taurus. Or is it? Well, let's actually have a look. So we've got 11794 here on the Quaoar, and if we move across to the Taurus, you'll see 10,883. Now, okay, yes, my Taurus isn't quite as upgraded on this time around as the Quaoar, and of course the Taurus, its pulse cannon system uses energy weapons, which ignore armor, whereas railguns obviously are a projectile weapon that attacks armor, and basically the Taurus is better against armored targets that have low shield, whereas the Quaoar is going to be a lot better against targets that are armored, that are shielded but with low armor. Ultimately, I think this is a really powerful destroyer. I mean, if we have a look at some of its other stats here, the propulsion system, 850, 4250, that is on the fast end of destroyers. 850 cruise, 4250 on warp. Early on, these are going to allow your fleets to be nice and fast. If you start moving things like Tauruses, you see that those do shut your speed right down. Here, if we look into the enhancements, however, it's just cruising and warp speed. A lot of Jupiter Industries ships have additional bonuses to their evasion. Not true here for the Quaoar, which is pretty much stuck on its standard stats. If we come into the armor system, you'll see we start with about 20 armor and 2% energy resist, 27,960 HP to begin with, and you get the ability to upgrade that by 10% for each of the enhancements here, which gives it a fair amount of HP actually, and you can up the physical resistance as well. Again, you don't get the option to upgrade the energy shields there at all, so again, you are going to be weak to energy weapons, but you're a fairly small target. As we come into the integrated railgun system, however, this is where things get really interesting. In addition to just having some really cool damage bonuses here, like increasing all railgun damage, decreasing weapon system cooldown, we also have this full firepower version here. Now, what this does is it reduces your hit rate, but increases your firing speed, basically. So as you can see here, you reduce your cooldown by 8% and the hit rate by 3% per level of this that you have. Now, yeah, you can go in and up the hit rate here against frigates and destroyers, but if, like me, you're using the Quaoar as something to take out carriers, battle cruisers, and things like that, this is a really interesting thing to go for, and you can see that each level of this massively increases that DPM. Now, ultimately, that DPM isn't, as you can see here, I've only got one level in full firepower at this point in time. It's the DPM you're seeing, that 11794, is with only one of these. Most of that's coming from the basic enhancement, and so is still going to be pretty good at hitting. I've then got a 3% reduction to the standard hit chance, but that's pushed my DPM right the way up there, and you can push it up higher and higher and higher. If you're going up against cruisers and larger targets mostly, then you can pump more into this. It's going to be beneficial to put into that full firepower stat there and just get some serious DPM and not worry too much that you're going to be aiming less and thus have a reduced hit chance, because you're going against bigger, slower targets anyway. As for some of the other things there was also a strategy here, the Concentrate Fire Periodically strategy, which sinks all weapons in the system to focus fire on a single target, reducing the cooldown by 80% every 90 seconds for 8 seconds, which again is absolutely massive. It does cost a lot of points, it's 15 enhancement points in order to be able to do so, but if you've got one, again, if you're going for things like carriers, then this is absolutely deadly, because that 11794 is going to shoot up even higher thanks to an 80% cooldown reduction for 8 seconds, and then 90 seconds later it's going to do that again, and it just absolutely rinses targets with it. It is insane. Now, somewhere on this, I thought I saw the ability for this as well to actually shoot at targets nearby as well, but I think that has changed with the current patch, so it has had a slight nerf, I think. The turrets certainly had an ability before where they were able to actually target nearby aircraft that weren't attacking at the Quaoar, but that does seem to have been taken off. So it looks like netties actually agree with me that the Quaoar itself, despite its unusual and somewhat difficult to pronounce name, is one heck of a beastie ship. I also have to say, I do really like the appearance of it. It's a little bit lumpy and bumpy, but it's just something really quite cool about this destroyer. And as I said, it packs an absolute punch. So I think a lot of people have been looking at the Quaoar as it first comes, you know, straight out of a blueprint and comparing it to things like the Winged Hussar and that, and just going, I don't see what the point in this. Why on earth would I bother, you know, building and fitting one of these? Why would I bother to enhance it? The simple reason is because it scales ridiculously well. Now, I don't know too much about the different variations of this as well. As you can see, I haven't unlocked its second type, and I don't know if there's a third type, but it does have the possibility of a torpedo type as well. And if we look at the stats here, if I go back into the standard stats, we have 6727 anti-ship to start with, 229 air defense, and there it is, 506 on siege fire. The torpedoes, on the other hand, these get, again, a slightly lower DPM there on anti-ship fire, but considerably more on air defense. I'm going to be interested to see how this actually works when I've unlocked it, because I get the feeling that we're looking at an Eternal Polaris projectile launching system. This has been used on other ships as well. I think it's the same one that's used on the Io, or the Eternal Storm, one of them. And again, I anticipate that that is going to scale really, really well, because torpedoes are an incredibly powerful weapon system that deal an awful lot of smack to a potential target. A lot of torpedoes tend to be launch, you know, heavy damage per hit, like the railguns, but then slow to reload. So I imagine what we're going to be seeing here is something that's a bit more toward the, you know, again, it scales up really, really nicely. You can see here the torpedo type is a middle row ship, designed against large ships, whereas the standard railgun type advertises itself as a middle row ship, useful against medium ships. I kind of disagree with that against medium ships thing here. The Quaoar is fantastic. If you go for the hit bonuses to frigates and destroyers, it will absolutely wreck any fleet of frigates and destroyers that come in front of it. As you'll have seen in the enhancement showcase a second ago, I haven't gone for those stats because I'm using it at this point in the server to go up against much bigger targets, and who boy does this thing really pull its weight. As I said, if there's a carrier in the fleet, it absolutely rinses it for some rather severe damage. Ultimately, I am flying this in a fleet full of plenty of other things capable of taking out other medium-sized targets, frigates and destroyers and things like that. So it kind of, the Quaoar really shines there, because I've got other ships that are going to blow up any frigates and destroyers nice and quickly. Then the Quaoar itself can start bringing that railgun to bear against those larger targets. Now, to me, as I said, I absolutely adore this ship. I'm waiting for some upgrades to make my fleets that little bit larger, and I'm going to be adding the last two of these into active service in that fleet. I have thoroughly enjoyed flying this ship and having it in my fleets, and I strongly recommend that you give it a try. Certainly, I've seen tons of people just lamenting that, oh, I got a new blueprint today, but oh, it was only the Quaoar, and it's not a great ship. No, that's lies, it's slander. This is an amazing ship, and if you get the blueprint for it, consider yourself very lucky. Good luck and enjoy flying it. Anyway, folks, if you have any questions about this ship or any of the other ships in Infinite Lagrange, please do feel free to let me know in the comment section down below. I'd love you to come and join me on Discord as well. That's linked in the description. My Discord is lively, full of a bunch of folk who are very interested in Infinite Lagrange and other mobile gaming spaceship games, and would love to talk to you about all those kind of things. And I want to know what ships you want to know more about. Is there a ship that you look at and you go, what on earth is the actual point in this? Because I'm a firm believer that there are no bad ships in Infinite Lagrange, just ones that people haven't quite figured out how to use yet. For example, the Carillion Recon, and this, the Quaoar. Anyway, I think I've said Quaoar entirely too many times in this video. It does feel good to say, give it a try, give it a try. Anyway, thanks for watching this one right the way to the end, folks. Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below. Happy sailing, and see you in Infinite Lagrange.